It was supposed to be just one last summer weekend in the hills. A farewell to late nights and careless mornings before college scattered us all like leaves in the wind. The cabin wasn't much, just 3 rooms, a crooked porch swing, and a fire pit surrounded by half-sunken chairs. But it was everything we needed. Set on a ridge overlooking Lake Hartley, it had a stillness that made you forget there was a world beyond the trees. Elijah's family had rented it every August for years. This time felt more final, like the last scene before the credits roll. Maybe because deep down we all knew it was. There were 6 of us that weekend. Me, Elijah, his girlfriend Kara, our friend Mason, his cousin Danny, and of course Elijah's mother, Simone. Simone wasn't like other moms. She didn't try to be cool, and maybe that's why she was. She had this grace about her, quiet, thoughtful, never overstated. The kind of person who could correct your grammar and compliment your laugh in the same breath. In her mid-40s, but you'd never guess it. She moved like someone who always knew where she was going. Dark auburn curls that caught gold in the light, and eyes that never gave away too much. She smiled with her eyes before her lips ever joined in. When she walked into a room, you noticed, even if you weren't trying to. That final morning, everyone was up early, bleary-eyed from too much whiskey and too little sleep. The place echoed with dragging luggage, the slap of flip-flops on wood, and sleepy goodbyes. Elijah was loading Kara's suitcase into Mason's car. Danny was already on the porch, scrolling through her phone and laughing at the weekend's worst photos. I stood at the kitchen counter, clutching a chipped mug that said, "Mondays are optional." That's when Simone walked in. She wore a long-sleeved tee and leggings, her hair tied in a loose knot at the nape of her neck. "You leaving with them?" she asked, like it didn't really matter either way. I shrugged. "Could. Mason's got room." She nodded, then paused. "Would you mind staying behind a little longer? I could use some help packing the last few things." Eli had to drive Kara back early and, she exhaled softly, I'd rather not do it alone. It didn't feel like a big ask. Truth was, I didn't have much waiting for me back in town. A cramped apartment, a dull retail job, roommates who existed more as background noise than people. So I said yes. Sure. Happy to help. Simone's smile wasn't wide. It wasn't forced. Just soft and sincere, like a quiet thank you could feel more than hear. By noon, everyone else had left. The air felt different then, cleaner, more still. The lake was almost too calm, like it was holding its breath. We moved through the empty cabin with a slow kind of rhythm, gathering forgotten flip-flops, folding beach towels still damp with the scent of lake water and sunscreen. "People get real bad at cleaning when they're having fun," she said, stuffing a handful of paper plates into a trash bag. I laughed. Especially Elijah. You'd think he grew up in a barn. She chuckled, low and dry. He practically did. I just added some drywall and called it parenting. We kept working. Simone was precise. She packed with intention, separating what was hers from what could be left behind. Watching her was like watching someone solve a puzzle they'd already solved before, patient, unhurried, deliberate. She told stories as we worked. About the cabin before Elijah was born. About the summers she spent here as a teenager, sneaking out through the woods and learning how to drive stick shift on gravel roads. Around 5, she poured us each a glass of wine. Not expensive, just some mellow red left from the night before. "Thank you," she said, offering me one. "For staying." I took it, unsure whether I should raise it, sip it, or just say something back. I settled on, "Thanks for having me." We leaned against the counter, drinking slowly, the sunlight pooling long and golden on the floorboards. Her phone played something soft, a folk album I didn't know but felt like I did. "You're quieter than the others," she said eventually. I glanced at her. "That a good thing?" She tilted her head slightly. "It's just a thing. But quiet people notice more." That stayed with me. Dinner was what was left, cold cuts, fruit, some chips. After, we carried the last few boxes upstairs. Most of Elijah's things were already packed, but her bedroom still looked lived in. Books half-shelved, a laundry basket with neatly folded clothes, framed snapshots of Elijah as a kid. His face rounder, eyes brighter, unaware of everything that would come. We didn't speak much then. The air felt dense, full of something unnamed. Not tension, but presence. Around 10, she said, "That's enough for today. Come down. I'll make tea." The kitchen was dim now. A single lamp cast a circle of amber light across the table. She moved barefoot, quietly like she always did. She handed me a mug. "I'll probably head out early," she said. "You can sleep in. I'll leave a note." I nodded, sipping even though it burned my tongue. Then she said, I'm gonna take a quick shower. I didn't answer. I just watched her walk away down the hall, her silhouette soft, shadows dancing on the walls. 10 minutes later, I was headed toward the guest room when I passed her door, half open. A thin strip of light spilled into the hall. I wasn't trying to look, but I did. She sat at the edge of the bed, wrapped in a towel, drying her hair with slow, circular movements. Then she looked up. Our eyes met. Neither of us moved. And then, without a word, she reached out and gently pulled the door, almost closed. Not all the way. Just enough. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tracing slow spirals with my eyes around the fan blades that turned like clock hands stuck in place. Outside, the lake hummed with the kind of silence you can only find deep in the hills. No cars, no sirens, just the occasional rustle of wind through pine. But in that guest room, the quiet was loud. Every creak of the old floorboards, every shift of the rafters above, felt like the house was breathing. Or listening. Her door never opened again. At least not that I saw. But I couldn't stop replaying it. How she'd looked right at me, how she hadn't said a word, and how she'd pulled the door almost closed like an invitation you weren't sure you were meant to accept. By morning, the light had turned gray. Mist rose from the lake in curling ribbons, draping the trees in gauze. I padded into the kitchen and found a note by the coffee pot. Thanks for your help. Keys are in the dish. Take care driving. No name. No heart. No trace of what had hung between us. I made coffee, sat barefoot on the back steps, and watched the mist drift across the surface of the lake. My mind spun in loops, caught between fantasy and doubt. Maybe the glance had meant nothing. Maybe she'd closed the door for privacy, and I'd read into it what I wanted to see. But the way her eyes held mine, the way she didn't flinch. I stayed out there long enough for the coffee to go cold. 3 days later, back in the city, I got a text from Elijah. Elijah, hey dude, thanks again for helping my mom. She said you were a lifesaver. Me no problem. She had a lot going on. Elijah, yeah, you know how she gets. Everything boxed and labeled like she's opening a museum exhibit. Me, haha yeah, she's efficient. Elijah, anyway, if you're free this week, come by. Pool's open. Got the filter fixed finally. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just let it hang there. That night, I got another message. Simone, hope you made it home okay. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, fingers hovering. Me yeah thanks. Everything's good. She didn't reply right away. But a minute later, Simone, you left your hoodie. That stopped me. I hadn't. I was sure of it. I'd packed everything. But I typed anyway. Mio, I can swing by tomorrow. Simone, sure. Whatever works for you. The next afternoon, I pulled up to their house a little after 4. The sky was a pale blue, streaked with soft clouds that looked like they'd been smudged with a thumb. Elijah's car wasn't in the driveway. I stood on the porch for a few seconds before I rang the bell. Simone opened the door almost instantly. She wore a blue linen blouse and dark slacks. Casual. Neat. Her hair fell in loose waves, not quite brushed out. She smiled, just enough to soften the air, not enough to explain it. Iced tea, she asked. Sure, I said, trying not to sound too aware of my own heartbeat. Inside, the house felt cooler than I remembered. Cooler and quieter. The walls were lined with photos. Elijah as a boy, grinning in oversized glasses, his arms wrapped around a golden retriever. Simone in the background of one, holding a garden hose, laughing. We sat at the kitchen table. She placed a glass in front of me and set the hoodie on the chair beside it. You didn't really leave it, I said. She didn't look up right away, just traced her finger along the rim of her glass. No, she said finally. I didn't. I nodded. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like a bridge we were both standing on. I wanted to see you, she said. That shifted something. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I'm not trying to make things difficult, she continued, voice soft but steady. Maybe I just wanted to feel noticed. Seen. Even if just for a little while. Her words weren't calculated. They weren't fishing for sympathy or flirting for power. They were honest. That's what made them hit harder. You always watch, she said. You're the one who listens. The one who pays attention when everyone else is trying to be heard. It's comforting. I didn't mean to say anything, but I heard myself reply. I'm not trying to be. She shook her head. That's why it works. Another silence. Longer this time. The iced tea sweated slowly between our fingers. She stood and walked to the window, resting her hands lightly on the edge of the sink. The light hit her hair like it had at the lake, warm and weightless. I should probably get going, I said, rising. She turned. Of course. But just as I stepped toward the door, she said one more thing. You can come by again. If you'd like. I didn't promise anything. Just gave a small nod and left. I told no one. Not Elijah. Not Mason. No one. But the days that followed felt wrong somehow. Or maybe too right in a way I didn't know what to do with. Every room I walked into felt too full or too empty. I couldn't stop hearing her voice when she said, I wanted to see you. Couldn't stop wondering what might have happened if I'd stepped further into that moment. Then came the night it rained. A storm rolled over the city like a blanket soaked in electricity. Streets flooded. Power flickered. Everything turned slick and hushed. I was across town at a friend's place when my phone buzzed. Simone, lights are out here. If you're nearby, I could use some company. Just talking. Just talking. And I went. Her neighborhood was blanketed in darkness when I arrived. The streetlights had cut out, and the only illumination came in brief flashes, lightning scattering across the sky like broken glass. I parked 2 houses down and ran the rest of the way, rain slicking my jacket, soaking into my shoes. She opened the door before I even knocked. Hey, she said, barely louder than the storm behind me. She wore an oversized cream-colored sweater, the sleeves pushed up past her elbows. Her hair was pulled back, loose strands clinging to her cheeks from the humidity. The only light came from a cluster of candles arranged along the hallway shelf and a small flashlight angled upward on the kitchen counter, throwing soft halos across the ceiling. You made it, she said. Yeah, I replied, breath-catching. Traffic was a mess. Simone took my jacket and hung it near the door. I stepped out of my soaked sneakers and followed her inside, the hardwood cool beneath my damp socks. The storm outside had quieted for a moment, just long enough to make the candlelight feel sacred. We were 2 people inside a soft cocoon of warmth and shadow while the rest of the world dissolved in the rain. She handed me a towel and motioned to the kitchen table. Sit, dry off. I did as she said, patting at my arms and neck while she poured tea from a thermos into 2 mismatched mugs. You okay? I asked once she sat across from me. She exhaled through her nose. I wasn't, but I am now. The words hung there, suspended between us. They didn't need clarification. We talked. Not in circles or with pretense. Just the easy, low-voiced exchange that happens when the power's out and time feels stretched. We talked about old books, new music, about the future. She told me she'd finally sold the cabin. I told her I had a few interviews lined up, though I wasn't sure I wanted any of them. She actually listened, like always. The thunder rolled again, deeper this time, rattling the kitchen window. Simone stood and walked into the living room, lighting another candle near the packed boxes. I followed her, leaning against the doorway. The room was half empty, stripped of comfort, no rug, no pictures on the walls. Just the bones of the house left behind. I've been trying to convince myself this place isn't haunted, she said. Haunted? By time, she said softly. By all the versions of us that passed through here. By what didn't happen, or what almost did. She lowered herself to the floor, cross-legged, the candlelight flickering across her face. I hesitated for a beat, then joined her. We didn't talk, just listened. To the rain, to our breathing, to the space between us. Then her hand brushed mine. It wasn't a grab, not a gesture made with confidence or intent. Just a soft resting of her fingers on mine, like she needed to know I was real. I didn't move. The silence turned heavy. Not uncomfortable, but thick with things unspoken. And then she whispered, You know this is wrong. I know, I replied, barely audible. But it doesn't feel wrong, she said, her eyes on the candle flame. I looked at her then. Not just at her face, but at the way the shadows curved beneath her eyes, the way her mouth didn't quite settle even when she wasn't speaking. She wasn't trying to be anything. Not alluring. Not strong. Just present. Just Simone. And I couldn't pretend anymore. I think about you, I said. More than I should. Her eyes flicked to mine. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said. Neither do I. We both understood exactly what we were doing. Or not doing. Standing on the edge of something too vast to measure. And yet neither of us stepped back. She leaned forward, not to kiss me, but to rest her forehead against mine. And for a few suspended seconds, that was all we did. Just breathed. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. It wasn't lust. It wasn't longing, not in the simple sense. It was that ache when 2 people who felt unseen for too long finally recognized the mirror in someone else. There was no clean place for it to land. No label. No future plan. Just ache. She pulled back first, her hand still on my arm. I should sleep, she said, barely more than breath. I stood too. Yeah, I should get going. Simone walked me to the door. Her fingers hovered near the knob, hesitating. Then just as I stepped out onto the porch, she said, "You could stay." I turned slowly. What? I mean, if the roads are bad. The guest room's made up. I hesitated. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded. So I stepped back inside. The door clicked closed behind me with the soft finality of something chosen. She led me down the hallway. The house groaned slightly under the force of the wind, as though the storm outside were pressing against the walls, warning us. Or maybe watching us. Each step I took felt slow, deliberate, like I was walking deeper into something I couldn't name. Simone paused at the last door on the right. She placed her hand on the frame and looked at me. "It's not much," she said, "but it's clean." I nodded. "Thanks." She opened it and reached for the lamp on the nightstand. The room glowed amber. A neatly made bed. A blanket folded at the foot. A bookshelf with a few dog-eared novels, spines creased. I stepped inside. She didn't follow, not yet. Just leaned against the door frame, watching. I turned. Met her gaze. "You don't have to leave the door open," I said, only half joking. She raised one eyebrow. "You think I'm afraid?" "No," I said. "I think I am." She took one step in, then another, and then she closed the door behind her. Not loud, not fast, just quietly, intentionally, like slipping beneath the surface of water you know will be cold. But going anyway. We didn't speak at first. We stood in the soft lamplight like two people standing on opposite ends of a thin rope, both knowing that any movement would pull the other closer. Her hands found my waist. Mine found her shoulders. She looked at me, not searching for permission, not asking for clarity, just waiting. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I told the truth. I've never wanted anyone more. She didn't answer with words. What happened next didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like surrender. Like something inevitable had finally arrived after knocking quietly at the door for too long. That night moved slowly, deliberately. No rush. No noise. Just the unspoken echo of want that had waited patiently beneath every shared glance. Every conversation stretched longer than necessary. There was no music. No thunder. Just the rain ticking softly against the windows, like time itself trying to keep us grounded. After, we lay in silence. Her head on my chest, my hand trailing soft circles along her back. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like guilt either. It felt like truth. The storm outside began to fade. The room breathed again. I could hear the wind shifting direction. A tree limb creaked softly against the house. "You're leaving tomorrow," I said, not a question. "I know," she whispered. "And you're staying." "Yeah." She didn't say more. Neither did I. Because what could we say that wouldn't break the spell? We both knew it couldn't last. That whatever world we'd made in that guest room was too fragile to survive outside its walls. That truth made it more painful. And maybe more real. When morning came, it came gently. A slow sunrise, as if the sky itself was unsure whether it should reveal the day. We dressed quietly. She brewed coffee. Neither of us filled the silence with small talk. We packed the last of the boxes together, loaded them into her car. Her landlord arrived just after 10 to check the meters. We nodded, smiled like strangers who'd shared a ride once. Before she left, Simone turned to me. No hug. No kiss. Just a long, quiet look. "Thank you," she said. "For seeing me." I nodded. "Always." And then she was gone. Weeks passed. Then months. We texted occasionally, short, simple updates. How the internship was going. How she'd moved into a small townhouse closer to the city. But we never mentioned the lake house. Never mentioned the storm. Never said anything that risked reopening what had been closed. It wasn't avoidance. It was preservation. That night didn't belong to the future. It belonged only to itself. Some nights, when the city was too loud or too quiet, I'd think about her. Not in longing exactly. More in recognition. Like remembering the one page in a book you never needed to bookmark because you knew exactly where to find it. I'd think about the way she'd looked when she said, "I wanted to see you." About the sound of the rain against the windows. About the way her hand had rested on mine, not asking for anything, just wanting to stay there a little longer. And though life moved on, new friends, new faces, days that blurred into each other, there was a part of me that stayed behind. In that room. In that silence. In that moment when the door quietly closed behind her. Because some stories don't need to last forever to be real. They just need to be remembered. The fall came quietly that year. It snuck in with shorter evenings, and that first cool wind that rustles through leaves like a whisper you can't quite catch. Classes started. I went through the motions. My internship turned into a part-time job. I filled my days with tasks and noise and people who never asked too many questions. But beneath it all, there was a stillness. Like something had gone quiet inside me. Not empty. Just paused. Every now and then, I'd see Elijah. We hung out less. School kept us both busy, and there was always someone else around, Kara, friends from campus, noise that made it easier to not notice the spaces between us. He never brought up the lake. Neither did I. But every so often, I'd catch myself looking over his shoulder, half expecting her voice to drift in from the next room. Like a phantom memory that hadn't quite let go of my skin. Then winter came. And with it, a message. Simone, I found a book you left behind. In the guest room. No rush, but if you ever want it back. I stared at it for longer than I needed to. I hadn't left a book. At least not on purpose. But I answered anyway. I could come by. If that's okay. Simone, it's always okay. I went 2 days later. The snow had fallen early, just a dusting, but enough to quiet the streets. Her townhouse was tucked away behind a row of maples, their branches skeletal and black against the sky. She opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was smaller now. Not guarded, but weathered. Like the kind that's been through a few more seasons than the last time you saw it. She handed me the book, a paperback I barely remembered. Probably something I'd tossed in my bag over the summer. I took it, unsure what to say. How have you been? I asked. She shrugged gently. Good days. Bad days. Trying not to measure things by what they used to be. We sat in her living room. The walls were different here. No photographs. No lake in the window. Just a bookshelf, a few plants, a chair with a blanket draped carefully over the back. I don't regret that night, she said suddenly. I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't. But I do think about it, she added, more than I should. I looked at her. She wasn't fishing for anything. Just laying a truth between us. I do too, I said. Still don't know what it was. She tilted her head, as if considering the question for the first time. It was a window, she said. One that opened. Just for a moment. And we stepped through. And now it's closed. Simone nodded. But we're still on the other side of it. Whether we admit it or not. She reached out then, not to touch, just to offer the gesture of it. And I took her hand. We sat there like that for a long while. The snow still falling outside. The world muffled. Quiet. When I finally stood to leave, she didn't walk me to the door. She stayed in the chair, legs curled beneath her, mug warm in her hands. Take care of yourself, she said. You too. I stepped outside. The snow crunched under my feet. The streetlight flickered overhead. And for a long time after, even as life surged forward and seasons shifted, I carried her with me. Not as a weight, but as a shape. A moment I had stepped through. One I'd never try to explain. One I'd never try to relive. Just a door that once quietly closed behind us. And stayed closed. But never forgotten.